Let's take a look at buttons inside of Bulma CSS. With Bulma, we can define our buttons using the button class. So for example, if we had an anchor tag, and that anchor tag was a standard button with the class of button, we could then see that we have this standard button. We can provide a variety of different styles for this button by using the is- attribute. So let's take a look by copying this button, and instead we'll call this one the white button. For the white button, we can add is-white. And as you can see, we have a button here, but it's different from our standard button and is this white background. We can do the same for a variety of different colors. If we did it here for light, we could use is-light. And the same goes for dark, black, and link. Each time, we're simply saying is- and then what we want, whether it's white, light, dark, and so on. Inside of our application, therefore, we can see we have a variety of different buttons, all of different colors. This offers us a variety of different standard/dark buttons, but we can also use different colors similar to Bootstrap. Let's now take a look at the different colored buttons, and we can start off by copying this standard button and saying instead that this one is primary and has the color of is primary. We can do the same for info and success. Warning. And finally, danger. As you can see on screen, now we have a variety of different colors, such as primary, info, success, warning, and of course danger. I'm going to comment this out for now. And this time we can take a look at different sizes. So Bulma offers us 4 different sizes. If we have ourselves a button again, this time we can have the button and is small attribute, and we can call this one a small button. We can do the same for a normal button. So this one would be normal button. Notice that we aren't using is normal. Normal is default in this case. We could do the same for button and is medium. With the medium button. And finally, we have button is large. If we now run this inside of our browser, we can of course see that we have the small button, the normal button, a medium-sized button, and of course a large button. So that's how we use different sized buttons with the particular class names. Let's comment that out once again, and we'll say this one is sizes, and up here is colors. As well as colors and sizes, we also have different styles. So we can go for a standard outline style that you may have seen in other frameworks. And that can be done with the standard anchor tag, but this time we're going to use is outlined. So we'll simply call this one outlined, and this will be a basic outlined. If we copy this, we can take the same colors from before, using things like is primary, to have a different color for our outline. So we can do primary, info, success, warning, and danger. As you can see here, we have a variety of different outline buttons now. If we select them, you'll notice that they remain selected. And if we deselect, they go back to their initial state. So let's say that these are outlines. And in this circumstance, we can take a look at inverting the colors. So it's a similar principle with the anchor tag having the button is primary and also having now is inverted. So this then takes the text color and that becomes the background color and vice versa. So let's call this one primary inverted. And I'll copy it for each one of them. And as you can see here, we have that white background color, and the color of the text of that button is now the particular primary, info, success, and so on. You will notice that the yellow has a black background when we invert it, and that's simply because you otherwise wouldn't be able to read the yellow on a white background. So let's call this one inverted. What we can do now though, is we can take advantage of both inverted and outlined. And I'll copy the same inverted code as we had before, but now we can add is outlined to each one of them. So it becomes button, is primary, is inverted, and also is outlined. Let's add it to each one of our buttons. And we'll call it primary, inverted, and outlined. And do it for each one of our colors. As you can see now, if we take a look at our inverted and outlined buttons, obviously the warning looks a bit out of place at this point, but if we select something like primary, you'll notice that it now goes white for a background and has of course that primary color. And if we select the various different colors, you'll notice that we therefore can read them too. Now that we've covered inverted and outlined, we can take a look at the different states our buttons can be in. So we've seen our normal state. So if we talk about states now, the normal state would simply be our initial buttons without any particular state. So in this sense, we're back to our normal buttons here because there is currently no state for that button. The next thing to look at is the hover state. So we can add is hovered to each one of our buttons. So we'll call this primary hovered button. And do it for the rest of our colors. And in this sense, it looks similar to our normal buttons. But things get a little bit interesting when we come to adding focused. So let's do it again, but this time, instead of hovered, we can change this for is focused. And therefore hovered becomes focused. For this, I'm also going to add a standard button without a color. So we'll just call this one normal focused button. And if we take a look inside of our project, you can once again see, and I've made this into a sort of bigger screen, that our buttons have this very, very slight shadow. And that's because the button is focused. This is more prominent if we put it in a smaller screen, and you can just see it at the top here. We also have another state, and that is active. So we can change that to is active. And you can see that the buttons are now depressed on the screen. So that is how the active state looks. Another state that we also have is the loading state, and this one's quite an interesting state. It certainly shows off much more than the other states do. And you should be seeing a recurring theme here, and that the framework is really easy to use because anytime we want to change something and use something like loading or active or focused, all we're doing is adding this isLoading class. So we can call this a normal loading button and go through each one of our buttons. As you can see, our buttons now have a variety of different loading icons. The next thing to look at is a static button. So if we had, for example, a span with a class of button and is static, you can see that we have this non-interactive element on screen that resembles a button, but of course can't be clicked like a standard anchor tag or button. If we took any one of our buttons, let's for example take the normal state for each one of them, we could also take a look at what they look like when they are disabled. So in order to do that, we can add the disabled attribute to each one of our buttons. As you can see, our buttons are here, but they're grayed out and obviously can't be clicked. This is different from the static button. We could of course remove this attribute inside of our JavaScript, and then of course the button would be available for use. I've ensured to add Font Awesome to the project, so here's the CDN. And then we can also now look at buttons with icons. So we'd potentially have a button, like before, with is primary or a different color. And inside of our button, we can have a span with the class of icon. And for example, if we wanted to show the Font Awesome Twitter icon, we could do that inside of our icon span using the I tag. And then if we had something saying follow, as maybe this button is to follow the user on Twitter, you can now see that we have a button that has the primary color with an icon and some text. So that's how we would make a button with icons, and obviously we can go through the different colors once again. As you can see, we have a variety of different colors now. We have our primary, we have our warning, info, danger, and so on. We can group together a variety of different buttons. For example, if we had a div with the class of field and is grouped, which is required here, we can have ourselves our previous set of buttons. But as they're all grouped together, and I also have the disabled attribute on them all too, so I will remove that. You can see that they're all aligned together. If we were to remove the field and grouped class, you can see that they're no longer aligned together and they continue to then wrap. So that's how we use a variety of different button components inside the Bulma CSS framework.